All right, what's going on, everybody? How are y'all doing today? It's your boy Crypto Wolf back again, and today we're going to do another little Market Cipher breakdown. We're going to be looking at the VWAP, particularly in like extreme detail. Going to be zooming in, looking at all the different little things that happen depending on which way it's going. So it's going to be interesting, and I've been paying attention to this one for a while, kind of studying how it works, and I think you might find something good, something informative out of this one. So real quick quote of the day: if you're presenting yourself with confidence, you can pull off pretty much anything. That is the absolute truth. As a matter of fact, I think I even told a story like that in a previous video that was interesting yet somewhat censored a little bit. But here we are, we're over here on the Ethereum chart once again, and crapping out. Okay, computer took a brain fart. And we're over here on the Ethereum chart, and I happen to have a trade open at the moment. I've had it open since like 1:30 in the afternoon, my time, which it is currently 11 o'clock p.m. So, yeah, pretty much rode it out through this entire uptrend. I got in like back here before we hit this, or was it back here? I think it was back here. Nope, that's 10 o'clock. Yeah, it was right over here before we got to this little fib level right there, and just kind of let it ride. And shoot, I was up to like 16% or something like that. I'm down to 6.15%, 6.37% at the moment, and it looks like we might be turning back up. So I actually moved the stop loss to where this red line is right here, because if we break this bottom over here, odds are we're going to keep coming back further, and I'm not going to ride it out at that point. But let's get into the VWAP a little bit here. So I've got everything else on Market Cipher B hidden, so we can take a look at this without any little distractions. And you notice when you do zoom it all the way in like this, which I don't normally do like ever, but for the sake of doing this, you can see the little individual little details and all the different little segments and all that good stuff. So the first thing I wanted to get into is, you know, the angle that this is going at. Now you can see right here we got a steep angle. You can see that's a little less steep. And if we move it, try to find one that's a little more exaggerated. So this one coming out, and you can see, you know, we start getting these little trends going on like that, but we'll get into that in a second. We've already kind of touched on it, but wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of it a little bit, because, you know, as I've been watching this, I've been noticing that you can tell what the behavior up here in the price action is doing or is going to do, you know, largely based on the specifics of what the VWAP is doing. As a matter of fact, speaking of, right now we just crossed back over the zero line, and I'll tell you why I wasn't worried about closing this one out, and it very much pertains to what we're talking about. So you can see as we're coming up here, you know, we're coming up fairly straight, but then we started to get this little curve. I'm going to exaggerate a little bit. Started getting this little curve back this way to the right. And in the case of, you know, being down here below zero, that little curve, as it's getting closer, kind of means that it's like stretching it out a little bit. So let's try to find a better example. That one's a little bit sharp. But basically it's kind of holding on to whatever trend is currently happening. Like here we were going sharp to the downside, which in the price action, you know, we came up, but we did kind of pull back a little bit. But we're still generally heading up, you know, as long as, this is mostly on like smaller time frames. We're on the 8-minute at the moment. You know, on these smaller time frames, as long as you are above the zero, it's generally going up. And it probably works a little better with Heikin-Ashi, because you're not just constantly seeing, you know, green, red, green, red, green, red, green, red. But you can see here where we started curving out and even ended up going straight to the side a little bit right there. And that is this uptrend just prolonging itself, just stretching it out. So even though it was heading straight down, it said, okay, wait, we're just going to hang out up here above zero for a little bit, keep this little uptrend going before it finally broke and headed to the downside and crossed the zero. And you can see crossed the zero on that candle right there, which we had already started pulling back a little bit. But even still, if you were to, get in here at the upward cross and get out on the downward cross, you still would have had a decent trade. And it's a fairly safe way to do it. So, 1.13%. Where if you were to get the tippy top and you were getting super precise, maybe you get the 1.4%. But not a big difference. And just that little bit you lose is a fair trade-off just to have some more confidence. Let's see if we can find a good... Let's see, here's kind of an interesting one, even though it did flop above and below. But, even though we're coming down sharp, took a bounce, headed back up, which can be a little frustrating if you are mechanically getting in and out on the crossovers. Because, maybe you got out there and then, turn right back around on you. So you got to decide, maybe you want, like, one candle confirmation after a crossover, but at the same time, there's other things that we're not seeing because we have it all hidden. So there's probably other things that, even though this was coming down, you might have seen that would be like, it's really not, it's not looking that bad. It's not looking like it's gonna, complete reversal on us. So you got to take that into account. You don't just want to go off of one indicator, but you can see here where it started going sideways, took a bounce again and continued sideways, and it just had this nice continuation of the uptrend going on there. And this one, it's hard to see in the Heikinashi. Did have a little bit of a pullback here at the last minute, but I'm guessing, if we were looking at the money flow, it was like coming up like this or something like that. Something showing us that, this was a healthy little move to the upside there. So even though it did dip below, I ended up having one more little pop up before breaking to the downside. But, back to these angles. So obviously if you have a steep angle, like near vertical, it's going to be a heavier, bigger, sharper, stronger move. Where you can see here, damn near vertical, and let's see, you get also, where you go from vertical and then you start tapering off a little bit, you start clipping, where, you might be going fairly straight up, but then you start getting flaky. And those are things you want to watch for, because, once you start clipping, it has a tendency to, reach a reversal point pretty soon. Here we go. It's like here, in a strong downtrend, we've been below zero, had that one little pop up, but, a very light angle right there. And you could tell, like, after this, it just kind of started going sideways. Pretty much right there at the crossover. But if you were seeing this big, this big dip going on right there, and it's stretching out rather than going straight up, okay, well, this downtrend's going to continue for a little bit longer. It's it's stretching out how long that's going on. And yeah, this is a close one, but okay, we're going to do it anyways, even though it's not the greatest example. But taking a bounce off the zero line is like one of my favorite things, because it just means that you have like so much bullish pressure in this case that, even though it just tiny little dips below, sometimes it might be a tiny bit below, or, just a straight bounce off the zero line. And so if you're in a long and you're going, you see it coming back a little bit and it bounces off, you're like, oh, I'm gravy. All right, we're good. and then comes back, did it again. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And at that point, and we're talking about scalping right here. You know, we go up to higher time frames and do the same thing, but you know, seeing those bounces off the zero is a very nice thing indeed. Now this one obviously just got pushed down once again anyways, but did have one more big candle just off that tiny little bounce. And you can see here's a good example of, you know, just curving on outward as this continued to the upside even for a little bit extra. So, you know, if you are in a trade and you're looking to exit and you're looking, you know, trying to find that nice exit point, you know, don't try to predict what it's going to do. You know, if you see it coming down, you know, don't get out just because you're getting close to the zero, because plenty of times I've had it happen and seen it happen even when I wasn't trading, where even if you only get one bounce or you just get, there's really none on the screen at the moment, but where you get a couple bounces. Matter of fact, we had one today on a different time frame. Let's see. Like this guy, that was a nice bounce that ended up kind of, whoops, that kind of formed a little uptrend right there. Had a nice little trend going right there. You can see a lot of them where they just barely go past. So you want to be careful not to get, you know, faked out on a situation like that. And obviously using the other indicators as well is going to give you a clue as to whether or not, you know, it still has strength in whatever direction you are going. And also, you know, if you're normally looking at it like this, you know, some of these little tiny crossovers really just kind of seem like, okay, we're hanging out above. Yeah, pretty strong above it. You know, strong below it. I think it's pretty much like a bounce off of it right there. Ah, here we go. That's the one I was looking for. Like here we had a couple nice bounces. So yeah, so don't jump the gun just because you know, maybe you see the price coming down a little bit. You're definitely going to want to wait and see what happens. Oh, look at this. Had a bunch of them right here. So definitely, I mean, without even looking at the price action, you kind of tell that, you know, probably had some bearish strength. Geez, I got a lisp now. What? Some bearish strength going on, even though we were still going up. You know, when you keep getting these bounces to stay down below, it would start making me a little suspicious. And it did. You know, shortly after we kept getting those, it reversed to the downside. But you can see all the little interesting things that happen in the course of watching this. It's like here, crossed up, didn't quite want to cross over, but went sideways. And if the VWAP is going sideways, generally speaking, the price is too. Let's see here if we could find, like here, kind of a funky one right there going sideways. You know, price just kind of not doing much, even though we were, you know, below zero. So it was a bit of a downward angle. Still had the red candles, but tiny, tiny little candles. You know, more a little sideways action right there, just low volume. And if you have been watching or paying attention to any of the other little divergence videos lately, you know, kind of my new favorite thing here is looking at divergence here in the VWAP. Quite useful indeed. So even though, you know, macro trends speaking, at the time we were in a big downtrend, it did, you know, signal a little reversal, a little bullish consolidation, if you will. And you can definitely see, you know, from time to time where you get, you know, little trend directions going on. Like, look at this guy, we're just kind of hitting resistance up here, where it just wasn't making it above. But we were still kind of increasing until finally broke through to the downside. Now, another interesting tidbit is, you know, when you're going with, you know, say this general size, this range of VWAP oscillations, and then you come out with a nice big one, but you don't get, you know, you're not getting a giant move in the price. You know, oftentimes that means, okay, it expended all of its bearish energy in this case, and could be continuing to the upside here. Like here, we did have a pretty decent size oscillation and did have a decent size price movement. But sometimes in other cases where you just had, you know, little guy here. So generally kind of your average, I don't know, depth, your average length. What are we down here in like the -20 area? It played out pretty decent. Plus we extended out for a little while, taking that bounce. So it came out to a decent little dip right there. But yeah, just remember, you know, just because the VWAP is going up doesn't necessarily mean the price is going up. Generally, when you get that crossover is where the reversal tends to be. And that's going to be mostly for the smaller time frames. Like if you come up here, let's say we're on the 6 hour. Let's see if I can not make a fool out of me on this one here. No, it's still doing it on the 6. Oh, that one's actually playing out pretty decent. Where are we at? Is it even higher? Okay, so here, you know, even though we're still in the red candles, you know, we had this big dip and then pulled back up fairly sharp. You know, that was right in this area right here. So rather than just having like this going on, we were still overall in this negative VWAP area, but did have a big, you know, quick dip and then pull back up like halfway before continuing on down. So up on this time frame, you know, see we kind of had another one right there as well. Yeah, this was a nice long one too. Actually, here we go. That's what I'm talking about. So VWAP crossed to the downside here on the daily, but we were generally still going up until about here. Yeah, started coming up within that candle, but these two were a little bit more accurate. But even though we were down below zero, the price was still going up. So on these higher time frames, just because it's a higher time frame, sometimes you got to be careful about that. like right here, pretty much from, you know, right around this point right here, we're already heading up. So it started heading up a little bit before it got to the 0 right there. And, you know, this is on the weekly, so if you were trying to do some long swing trades and you were trying to hit the reversal point, obviously you wouldn't want to be entering on the friggin' weekly chart. That'd be kind of ridiculous, because that's, you know, a big old range in there. A lot of money you'd be missing depending on when you got in on it. But you can kind of see, like, okay, you know, we were already heading back up, despite the fact that the Heikinashis hadn't changed colors yet, you know, prior to getting to the 0 line right there. A little bit again right there too, even though we dipped below. Whoops, still heading up. This is a nice little trend right here. Look at that. Some really, really nice VWAP divergence right there. On a weekly chart, no less. Speaking of, where are we at here? Oh, got a red candle. See? We're above 0. Kind of coming back down a little bit, as the VWAP is pointing down, even though we are in the positive numbers. I should have just pointed to that. That's exactly what the hell I'm talking about. But so yeah, so just watch that one on the higher time frames. But all right, I'm not going to go too much more into this one. If there's you know, any other little aspects, you could pretty much kind of use common sense from this point. Just watch what happens while, you know, the VWAP's doing its thing, like right here. Starting to look a little bit like some bearish divergence on that guy. And of course, we did cross over to the downside. There's my little inaccurate prediction. We'll see what happens with that one. Did have a little uptrend forming even prior to there, even though you wouldn't know it back here at the time. But you would see this guy right there, that guy right there. So we did have divergence going on right there, but it's interesting to see, you know, these longer trends in the VWAP forming, you know, long before the actual uptrend. It's interesting indeed. That's something I'm going to have to pay a little bit more attention to here in the future. Look at this. I had a general uptrend forming on that VWAP, even way back here. So, you know, back here you'd be kind of looking at it like, okay, you got bullish divergence going on right there. And even then, that bullish divergence, you know, initially you'd be looking at this until you got this big old pullback in the VWAP here, even though it wasn't that much of a pullback on the price, kind of like we were talking about a minute ago. But in the larger kind of macro scheme of things, pretty much had this trend starting from all the way back here. Interesting, interesting. As well as here. Kind of want to just like drag this out and see what happens. Question is, do we start this one? Oops. Who knows? We'll see what happens. It could mean that we have some more of this uptrend to go. I would like that. Be nice to just drag this trade out for days. Very similar thing going on the Bitcoin chart here. Looks like kind of lagging behind ETH, where ETH's pulling back a little bit. Man, I'm half tempted to close it right now and just pick it back up after it comes down. Then again, I'll probably be asleep for that, so meh. Let's see, what should we do? You know, kind of getting into green candles over here on the 24. Starting to push back upward. I'm going to let it ride. I'm going to see. It's not a huge one anyways. Real quick, let's see what's going on. Who was doing anything special today? Bitcoin Cash. Look at that. Aave, VeChain, Avalanche, Thorchain, ApeCoin. A lot of stuff going on with all the Bored Ape kind of universe right now. So it doesn't really surprise me to see ApeCoin back at it again. That audio having a decent little run. Avalanche, basically the exact same thing. Yeah, Wave's looking a little bit more like everybody else. Has some nice little spikes right there. Compound. Look at Compound. Not to mention, on top of that, like a little less volatile. You know, fairly tight channels going up. Ooh, starting to push upward at the moment too. You can see, you know, we got a lot more price movement on these. Whoa, what was that? Origin with a big pump. What was it? 17? All right, you know what? Well, since we're doing some analysis, let's turn everything else back on so we can actually see what's going on here. As you can see, pretty much all day, the RSI was just staying nice and tight. Generally, just kept on working its way on the upside. We got a little bitty divergence going on here on the momentum waves. You know, VWAP crossing up, but it's not super strong. You can see where it's already starting to clip sideways. You know, rather than continuing this angle, kind of starting to head off this way. So that doesn't necessarily bode well for the bulls. And as you can see, got a little bit of a, what is that? Well, not technically, that's, yeah, so we got a little bit of bearish divergence going on there as well. Spaced out a little bit far, but I mean, even just between this guy right there, had some bearish divergence going on. With the money flow as well, got some bearish divergence going on. You know, definitely had it between those two little peaks. And it looks like that's probably all that played out from that bearish divergence. You know, momentum waves took a nice little bounce off the zero line. Yeah, we'll have to see what the the money flow ends up doing here, because we are just getting into the green on the 1 hour. But we have been a little weak on the green side lately. Just, you know, pretty flaky for a while now when it comes to, you know, the money flowing in. And not to mention, we have this gigantic split that was going all day on the RSI. So even though, you know, we were heading up, I was seeing that and I'm like, you know, that really does not look good. But, you know, you switch to a different time frame and it's definitely not reflected as much. Like on the 2 hour, they're still generally kind of close. 3 hour, you know, it's starting to get some split now a little bit. 4 hour, again, started to get some split when we got to the top, you know, after this initial pump. But over here on the 4 hour, you know, potentially money flow curving back up. So, you know, we could be looking at least a decent little uptrend here going on for the next few days. We'll see. We got, you know, the holiday weekend coming up. I'm honestly not sure how that's going to play out. Usually holiday weekends are not all that great for trading. But if we are starting an uptrend right now, you know, at the very least, maybe we just kind of have this little upward consolidation going on. And then just pick back up on the following Monday. So we shall see. But all right, I'm going to cut this one. I don't want to drag it on too long or have to wait for this damn thing to upload. Hope you got something interesting. You know, just food for thought. You know, pay attention to the little things beyond just, you know, crossing over. You know, watch the angle, watch the depth of these VWAP waves. You know, watch when you cross over the zero line, but then you just kind of go sideways and you just get a super weak move on the upside. You know, you could see it was just sideways consolidation right there. Didn't get too far above on the upside right here. Did have, you know, one little candle going up right at the end before straight drop back down. So yeah, the more you learn, you know, how to recognize what the price action looks like when the VWAP does certain things, the more it helps you to predict what it is likely to do, you know, in the moment. Like right now, we just took basically a bounce off the zero to the downside. So even though we picked back up a tiny bit, we'll see if, you know, if we can keep a higher low on that VWAP. That would actually be a pretty good thing. But if we end up coming in and spiking down, you know, this guy's going to pull back a little ways. But all right, looking forward to this. We'll get the 3-day weekend coming up here. So definitely going to be putting out some good stuff. And likely on Friday, got a new little series coming up. Just got done working on how to accomplish that. So that one should be interesting. Looking forward to actually getting to talk to you guys a little bit here. And I shall see you tomorrow. Remember, stay free, stay happy, and keep being a badass. Later.